Okay, recording started.
Actually, I won't be part of the final video, so it's I've now pinned you on Zoom. It will record on Zoom as well, sort
Yeah,
of insurance.
yeah. So
Um,
it's going to be just me talking.
yes, and we'll intersperse it with whatever visual material that is relevant to what you're saying.
Right. So are you going to
Um,
ask me the questions in between, or are we going to have a discussion type thing, or I just have to those three
no,
questions?
I'll ask you questions,
Okay.
and then you'll respond. Um, but of course, I'll largely remain silent in when you're responding because
Yeah.
uh, I'll be edited out of the final thing.
Yeah. That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be a problem.
Okay. So I mean, just um, because we have had briefly spoken, so just to sort of recap the motivations for this series, comics and contemporary art.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, so there's of course, a sort of there appears always to be, um, even in the first instance, both some sort of a connection between these two, and also a distinction between these two. So
Hmm.
the distinction is always, of course, one is considered sort of serious or high culture, something like that. The other is considered popular culture, things like that. But then also they also seem to meet somewhere. Where exactly is of course not such an easy issue to settle, but sort of instinctively at the point of the drawing or the sketch, there seems to be a connection. Even historically, there might be a connection there.
That's right.
Um, so I was thinking maybe, um, and of course, um, I also wanted your thoughts, since you're working in this area, but also you spoken about and written about it, about this, the relation, and the relation including the tension of how these two domains interact in India, because there's always lots of material available about Europe and America, but also about India.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe we can, if you can tell us a little bit about what you think are the historical connections
Right.
between comics, cartooning, and the fine arts,
Right.
between these two.
Yeah. I'll just switch off my phone. So, uh, okay. Comics, cartooning, and fine arts. Right.
Yes.
Um, uh, well, I can. I mean, I could speak. I could, give a uh, some kind of uh, personal view, um,
Yeah.
coming from my own experience. I initially wanted to be in fact, I started drawing by copying cartoons, and those cartoons tended to be the ones appearing in newspapers. So R.K. Lakshman, Mario Miranda, although these were the artists who appeared in newspapers when we were kids. Uh, so Mario Miranda appeared in the Economic Times, and uh, R.K. Lakshman appeared in Times of India, and there were many others, including Abu Abraham and uh, uh, quite a few others. I'm not recollecting the names right now, but yes, there were many artists. Ajit Nainan, most importantly, because he was an artist whose work appeared in Target magazine, and he was kind of like the flagship artist of Target magazine, because he did their most popular comic called Detective Muchwala, and he also had a page of like single panel joke cartoons, the funnies. And then so his work was I started by copying these cartoonists, and then gradually one starts drawing, but drawing and then getting into painting and so on. And but when I went to art school, um, to my horror, I discovered that nobody really was interested in these artists at all, who I kind of idolized, and I thought, yeah, that's the kind of model or standard one would aspire to. I thought they were perfectly legitimate models to emulate. But in art school, I was in for a shock, because these models were not. They were, forget about not emulating. They weren't even considered as part of the world of fine arts. Therefore there was no discussion even about cartooning as that. I mean, as some kind of an art, or even in terms of art criticism. Or there wasn't any, absolutely no discussion. Nobody was writing about it. Nobody was discussing it. But I thought the links, even then, for me the links were pretty clear. But from Ravi Verma to Amar Chitrakatha to it was, so they would discuss Ravi Verma, but when it came to Amar Chitrakatha, which is like for me there's a direct line from there. Uh, Amar Chitrakatha was not discussed or worthy of discussion as a uh, in terms of its in terms of art, right? Ram Verkar, who is one of the important artists in Amachitratha, I mean, I liked his work. He did very eroticized images of Parvati and Shiva, and that was a very revealing comic for me, particularly the love story between Shiva and Parvati. By his line work was fantastic. I thought it was equal to any. I mean, it was as on par with any other artist, right? So, but they did, but of course, so the my experience was that there was a sharp distinction between cartooning uh, and fine arts, and it was expressed in this derogatory term called illustrative. It was a jargon that was used in art school where I studied in Baroda, Faculty of Fine Arts, and illustrative was jargon or euphemism for bad art. Like if the work is considered bad, they would use the term illustrative. So as illustration is bad, so therefore your work is bad. So you have to move beyond illustrate. Good art is beyond illustration, is what we were taught. That was the orthodoxy, and this I'm talking about the mid 90s. I mean, it's not that long ago. 1996, 97. That was the time I joined Baroda, and so this put me in a very difficult position, because I didn't know how to move forward from there, and uh, gradually I discovered uh, that comics and fine art seem to be, they don't seem to meet, and they are like divergent roads, and at least in India, in the Indian context, and so I decided that, okay, if there are these two separate roads, then I will choose the path of of comics, uh, or the path of illustration. So it was also a kind of a youthful rebellion against the standards of the day. And I said, okay, illustrative, so be it. So my work is illustrative. But then at the same time, there were artists like uh, Shibu Notation, for instance, who were starting to do this photorealist sort of paintings, and then there were some other people who were trying to get this. I mean, I don't remember the names, but because I'm already very unfamiliar with the world of fine arts now. Um, but there were people who were trying to bring in a sort of graffiti, uh, the the formal qualities of graffiti, let's say, into their work. So they were trying out a few things like that. So on the other hand, there was this little this there was this little subculture where popular um, popular imagery was moving in, and that was when the term postmodernism also was introduced into Baroda. This was the mid 90s, and we all, for everybody, it was a new term, and was say, "Oh, modernism is over now." So that was the discussion. Oh, we are in a post phase of modernism, after modernism. So, and where pop culture has suddenly gained the significance, but even then, comics was never part of that debate. Uh, so I moved away. I moved away, and when I started doing comics later, I always kind of tried to engage with the um, uh, let's say the artistic dogmas that persist in Indian art, um, only to try and criticize it, to critique it. So only from the perspective of doing a critique. Um, the relation between comics and fine art is one of, I think, it's class, and there is class difference. Art is obviously higher class, so there is a class difference certainly as part of it, or I think it's an important part of the distinction that is there in India. And I don't know how to what extent caste and things like that play a role. Caste ideology plays a role, but it's something to investigate, because um, tribal art, for instance, is appropriated in comics, as we were talking the other day. Tribal art has been used in Bimayana, the biography or graphic biography of Dr. Ambedkar. So those are areas, highly problematic areas, for as far as I'm concerned. So so definitely there is a class difference between comics and um, fine art. Now between comics and cartooning, there is another kind of distinction, because political cartooning had already gained a certain respectability, um, because of their status as front page newspaper comics cartoons. They appeared on the front page in newspapers, so they got space, and they had, but all that is of course post liberalization or post capitalist um, India. In capitalist India, we those spaces have shrunk significantly. Uh, but political cartooning, always retained a certain status. And for me, that status, that was a status. Okay, I want to be an artist, so you want to be appreciated, but that's a status to have. Oh, I wish I also had a strip like that in the newspaper. So that those were aspirational things. Uh, I'm sure I held that when I was a kid. Uh, but just when my aspirations were developing, that was a very moment when all those spaces were shrinking rapidly. And comics itself as a publishing and economic activity, publishing was fading away. Amar Chitakatha was failing in a big way. I mean, they were not growing, and they were actually shrinking. They were thankfully bought over by diasporic or expatriate Indians who, because of their nostalgia for some kind of uh, imagined Indian past, they have taken Amar Chitakatha as a sort of a visual cultural carrier of that nostalgia, and so that's why it's being kept alive, I believe. Otherwise, Amar Chitakatha would have been dead long ago. Uh, I don't know. I just digressed here and there. But uh, is there any question relating to this? Would you?
No, so we just because you hinted at this, so I was wondering if you can elaborate more um, when you mentioned that some parts of comics, cartoons, etc., have gained this quote unquote respect
Yeah.
in and so I was wondering if you can tell us what you think are the reasons. These could be historical reasons, or is it that some new kind of comic making or cartoon making has come into being? What are the reasons?
Right. Um, firstly, not firstly, but I think that in since the 1990s, with this whole wave of postmodernism in art, uh, uh, the concept of the graphic novel gained kind of acceptance as a literary form, and so of course the word graphic novel, the phrase graphic novel, is a marketing term precisely created in order to create that respectability for the comic, and so that comics could take pride of place alongside other text literature on the bookshelves. In the in and along with that, with the coining of the phrase, um, uh, and the usage of that phrase, uh, the theoretical underpinning, I think, is that uh, uh, in terms of artistic expression or formal expression, um, they started to think that all kinds of, or decided to accept all kinds of modes of these expressions. So, coming from art history, say, an expressionistic style of drawing and coloring, and uh, the usage of the mixed usage or mixed media, for instance, coming from the collage traditions of modern art. And so this kind of use or quoting or usage of um, modern art uh, methods of expression, that is, and so that, so it was not just the kind of expression that developed within comics. So within comics, we have this uh, 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 emphasis on line art, um, which in fact was scoffed upon by the people who are doing fine art, because it's all art was all about mark making, as they call it these days. They never said, nobody ever used the term, by the way, mark making when I was in art school. That that term mark making is also of recent origin, um, and now it's used in all art schools, I think. So anyway, so the kind of comics drawing that made comics what they were. They had a distinct visual, or popular comics had a distinct visual uh, visual repertoire, um, which the graphic novelists started, looking at it, uh, um, with a critical eye, and saying that, okay, now let's try and bring in more artistic modes of drawing, um, in our expression, because we want to say complex things, and we want to do a complicated literature in comics. So our artistic style should expand and become more diverse. And this diversity uh, became part of the uh, it became a sort of a publishing mantra, right? So publishers started looking at different kinds of art styles being used or appropriated into the comics medium. So, and in that line, we see in the Indian context, we see tribal art being utilized. Uh, Tribal art, folk, because they have this certain line, emphasis on line. So it's a kind of a very facetious, what do you say? Um, uh, Superficial connection. Like, just because there's certain kinds of, okay, Gond art has a certain line, a uh, you know line work, so it's easily, you can, oh, this is like comics, so you can be used in comics, things like that. And the Patchitra has this line art. So it used in a very uncritical way is what I would say. uh, and this is part of the respectability, or process of creating respectability for comics, or comics slash graphic novels in India. And what this did was sideline the kind of comics or cartooning, which was the basis for comics drawing, up till then. And the kind of artwork that Amar Chitakara did, or Tinkle, or um, any of the other cartoonists who also did comics, short comics, of course, but they did comics. Um, in fact, the diversity was already there within cartooning. Very individualistic expressions were already there in say, in a children's magazine like Target. Target had so many different cartooning styles, and each one developed, very individualistically by the artist, whoever that was, from Manjula Padmanabhan to Ajit Nainan to Atanu Roy, uh, Jayanto. There's just some of the names I remember from my childhood, and they're all working. Of course, they're all there, but they are not there in the mainstream discussion of graphic novels, right? They're not at all there. Uh, uh, yeah. So yes. So what I want to say is that the cartooning styles that had already developed, uh, sadly became, sort of less respectable, whereas uh, the appropriation of art styles related to art history, the mainstream art history, started gaining kind of acceptance, is what. And of course, tribal art has always had, I mean, in India, a very very uh, problematic position, according to me, in the canon of Indian art, and for me, that is a huge area of critique that I think needs to be undertaken in modern Indian artistry itself. And so I could see that there was a kind of a parallel movement, and this reminds me that Ghulam Muhammad Sheikh, the pioneering modern Indian artist, who very important artist from the 1960s, Baroda. Ghulam Muhammad Sheikh, in fact, used to make comics as a kid, which he never showed anybody. But he suddenly one day sent. I was in touch with him for some reason, and then he happened to send me, uh, uh, which I which I have uploaded online as well. He sent me a comic that he did as a child, as a youth, I think, as a teenager. Um, Maybe he was 12 years old or 12, 13 years old. And they made these handmade magazines. Right? So, but he was doing his own kind of cartooning, but which completely disappeared when he's in his fine arts work. So there's no, you can't trace a link from his cartooning to his oil painting, which is also narrative oil painting. But it seems to me that there was some deliberate repression at work in order for someone like Ghulam Sheikh to uh, invent his own way of painting. So they got into the polemics of what modern art should be and what modern art should look like. And in that polemic, I think they completely brushed aside their own expression in trying to, create something that they considered is authentically an Indian art or an Indian modern art. So they were too concerned with this kind of, I think, I would consider that a false problem of trying to find an Indian art. There's no, I don't think there is such a thing as an Indian art, Indian modern art. Uh, it has too many problems, I think. So, but in trying to make that Indian art, they actually gave up their own expressions. Is what appears to me to be the case. I mean, I would look at it. I would speculate that way. Uh, so yeah. So this respectability thing is in comics, in contemporary Indian comics, it plays out, I think, as a sort of a battle on the arena of artistry. So yeah.
So would you, because there's, of course, possibly a more recent uh, phenomenon of these comics artists, or artists um, who primarily, or at least started out as comics artists or graphic novelists.
Hmm.
Now increasingly, not just in India actually, but we'll speak mostly about in India. They're featuring in galleries and biennials and in the fine arts, contemporary art circuit. So uh, if I'm thinking of what you just mentioned earlier, so is it, so there was a moment when within comics there was an entry of influences, or techniques, styles from fine arts into comics, and that is what made the comics more respectable for the fine arts.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah. Roughly, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah,
okay?
it comes on the platform of a fine art expression, so that they brought in a sort of fine art expression, which is considered fine art, expressions that were already judged or already designated as fine art expression. Those modes were brought into comics, mixed with a speech bubble and things like that. What is Bhimayana at the end of the day? It's it's just dumping speech bubbles onto tribal art and changing the content. So the content is given to the tribal artist saying, okay, now you are doing all your own mythology or whatever. Now I'm giving you the story of Ambedkar. Now you just draw it in the same style, and then we'll paste some speech bubbles on top of it, and I will provide the text. It's a most spurious kind of cultural whatever engineering, or yeah. I think I have major problems with it. Yeah.
Hmm. Um, when we spoke earlier, you said that that something like because now we've also mentioned tribal art and some of those forms of art, that even comics, who at the top of this discussion we placed comic art and fine art, and then sort of fine art would be the sort of higher category, or more serious, etc. And then comics would perhaps be called popular art, etc. But you had mentioned that maybe comics are at least not popular culture in the same way that it's in Japan or in America, etc. Um, so how would you then sort of, I know that there's a diversity of comic styles, but how would you place comics in the cultural domain in India?
Uh, yeah. Uh, that's a very the most important question right now, and it's I think a political question because um, uh, 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 the I mean, what kind of place it occupies, or it should occupy, or it ought to occupy, uh, uh, it depends on the way on the kind of value you give to comics, right? Um, so in our situation right now in India, first of all, the production of new comics is very small. It's a very tiny uh, minuscule part of the publishing scene. On mobile comic on mobile, for instance, it's hardly there. Whereas in many of the other popular comics, where other countries where comics are popular, like mobile comics, webtoon and things like that, are very popular and read by Indians as well. But in India, uh, so we have to confront the fact that there are very few comics being actually made. So which means that there are very few people actually reading them. Um, uh, Very few people reading them. So we cannot talk about popularity or popular culture in that sense. However, then the question, of course, as you raised, question remains: what kind of a place does it occupy? And then that becomes a political question. So, to say that, okay, the kind of the kind of space I think it should occupy is all the the entire space of democratic free expression, um, uh, in a political democracy, right? In a country that apparently practices democracy, which we don't see today. Today, anyway, that the spaces are few, but comics has since it is historically linked to cartooning, and cartooning is linked to satire, and speaking truth to power, uh, satirizing the powers of the day, has always been the mainstay of cartooning. And I think that is the most powerful aspect of cartooning, which somehow, not somehow, but which, because of this kind of comics gaining, because comics have gained respect as sort of a kind of fine art, they also have lost that edge of being a counterculture, part of a counterculture, part of the culture of criticism, popular discourse. So they have not. So whereas cartooning is powerful as a space for popular discourse. Of course, you can always argue that now that space has been occupied by the so-called memes and social media images, uh, which uh, which express opinions from all kinds of all um, hues of the political spectrum. Uh, but I don't think uh, that connection is too helpful, in the sense that, to me, cartooning and comics still have to should retain a sort of autonomy in the sense that they have to uh, they have to claim that they are an individual's expression, and not only an anonymous collective expression. That collective expression, there's another. I mean, one could. I would make a different kind of a critique of the sort of meme culture, or the kind of cartoons that, or that criticize the government or the media or whatever. I mean, the kind of cartoons that go on float on social media. Uh, I would distinguish that culture from the kind of cartooning thing that that I would like uh, uh, I would like to see as a popular culture. So, um, so just to repeat, uh, the, in, there's a move from the other side, which is that the fine arts space has apparently opened its doors to cartooning practice, and there is some discussion that is happening about the history of cartooning in India, but uh, uh, I think these are premature kind of discussions. I think that it's not founded on actual practice. Actual practice is that very few people are doing it, and if very few people are doing it, uh, 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 the only claim that I think comics can make in comics practice can make in India is that it is an expression that is uh, uh, pretty much underground. That it, in the sense that it hardly has any cultural impact to for it to be something serious. But having said that, then there are certain kinds of images, for instance, which where lots where the political cultural debate happens. Say, for instance, the image um, of the Hindu gods and goddesses. So that those images, for instance, there is definitely a popular space, because obviously uh, that the narratives that are linked to these images are known by a large part, the majority of society. And so what? So how those images are made then becomes important. So the image of Ram, uh, the used by the uh, by the BJP, for instance, is different from another kind of Ram that appears in some comics work, which is uh, say uh, 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 you know, like the fantasy adaptations of Ramayana that are there in, you know, uh, in the Indian comic scene. So I mean, there are different approaches to creating the character, because they want to use the character and say something else and turn that into a fantasy character, secularize the character. All these attempts have happened. So there are of course cartoon or even uh, uh, versions inspired by Japanese animation, which are in fact Ramayana was in fact the first ever animation feature film in India. I mean, based on Indian material. Um, in fact, it's the first animation feature. I don't know of any other film. So Ramayana, the legend of Rama, uh, is a good instance of that kind of cultural battle where in India it was considered as an insult to draw a cartoon of or to use Ram as in that cartoon form. Even then, that discussion was very prominent. This was the early 90s when the Babri Masjid thing was happening, demolition was happening. Uh, uh, so there the idea of cartooning coming into popular culture and generating a certain kind of artistic discourse, there was some possibility there, but which which got um, kind of suppressed very quickly. And so even now there is, for instance, the angry Hanuman uh, graphic that has become car decal that has become quite popular. So you have it in the backs of vehicles on auto rickshaws, for instance. So this is a new kind of design of the Hanuman character based on certain contemporary uh, American comics superhero design. You know, so the way the kind of sharp line work that is used in that Angry Hanuman picture is taken from there, and so there is that kind of cultural mixing or give and take that is happening in these mythological in the area of mythological imagery or popular imagery of mythological characters, and then that ties into religious ideology, that ties into political ideologies. So they are of course linked, and so that's an interesting area that is developing. But um, but comics, of course, means comics is stories, and you have to tell a story in the using that form. So the stories are not there. There are definitely images and there are characters. Those kind of things are floating around. But I don't see say somebody could have made angry Hanuman comic using that kind of art style. For you know, they could have done comics based on that kind of art style. But nobody's drawing a angry Hanuman comic. I don't. I have not seen it. Even if it's there, I have not seen it. And I doubt that there is, like a 20-page story with that angry Hanuman kind of character, that sort of design. So, so it's, just to summarize, yeah, the space that comics occupies is tiny, because we are tiny in the sense that it's I guess kind of an indifferent space, or how does one put it? I mean, I'm trying to find an analogy with other kinds of art forms. Um, uh, no, I'm not able to find. So despite, I mean, I'm putting it in terms of an irony, that despite the fact that the concept of graphic novel and comics um, being looked at seriously by fine art practitioners, fine artists, uh, yet comics does not really um, have uh, a large enough public space, a space of discourse that is large enough to warrant some serious uh, uh, warrant a serious kind of critique or discussion. Okay. So that is yet to happen. That is yet to happen.
Okay, just one last question. I know I didn't send you this question, but based on what you just said,
Yeah,
um, the I was wondering if you could say more about the distinction you would draw between this memes, production of memes, and that sort of meme culture, and comics, because some of the as you know sort of popular image production, which is not um, which circulates a lot, and then has some amount of this sort of satirical laughing at power function
yeah.
that you mentioned,
Yes.
which cartoons and comics had. Um, um, Now, of course, you mentioned one point of difference, which was that, um, in a sense, comics are authorial. That's a clear author, and it comes about as individual expression. Um, but what are the how do you why would you think that there are that we must seriously separate these two?
Um, I think that has a lot to do uh, uh, with the concept of social media itself. That is, uh, 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 I would put emphasis on the fact that the images of this kind come with a lot of with all these meta information that is around the picture, and that is any picture, and that does not have to be a meme or I mean something that is made. It's any photograph or any video on social media is mediated for us. Our relationship to that picture is mediated by the the meta discourse around that picture, and that has to do with the comments thing, that comments, the the whole chain, the comments chain, and that has to do with where it's appearing, who is resharing it, who is forwarding it, uh, and those, the simply the act of, okay, I got this picture forwarded to me by my friend, then has some kind of uh, implication to the reading of the picture. Uh, so for me, despite its creative aspects, of course, I mean, they spend time. Somebody sat on the computer and put some picture together, and some text and some picture, and that becomes a data object which goes around. But But I think for me, uh, 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 that very mode of circulating pictures is deeply problematic to me. Regardless of the content, you see, I mean, I could have drawn a cartoon, actual cartoon also. Like, I mean, I could, or any cartoonist. I mean, in fact, they do. So cartoonists are already there on. I mean, they have been there on Instagram and other social media platforms, and they are doing cartooning, and their work is shared and all that. Uh, uh, but of course, that is cartooning, and that is to do with that is close. The meme culture is closer to the old cartooning culture. That much I can. That is definitely something I would agree with, and that the meme culture has broadened the space of what we used to call cartooning earlier, political cartooning earlier. That was also agreeable. Well, earlier the poster art, for instance, had that kind of function. Photo montage had that kind of function before the internet. But to me, the space of comics. Uh, 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 I want to claim, or I want to reclaim, or claim that that comics, uh, the space of comics, uh, uh, is an individual relation between the reader and the maker. I think that is a very important aspect of what of how comics art or comics uh, production, or the way comics are made. Uh, I think that's an important part of that of the experience of reading a comic, um, and and I mean, this is demonstrated, I think, by the fact that uh, if you like, there's a very common phenomenon that when you like a comic a lot, you tend to copy the characters, copy the artwork. I mean, what is that urge? What is that urge to? In this all of us have experienced. Who, if you like a comic so much, you want to also draw that. You also want to draw the same character. You want to kind of claim that space by drawing it, and that is by drawing it you get a little closer to the uh, you enter into a dialogue. You can put it that way. You enter into a dialogue with the maker of the comic, and I think that is a very essential aspect of comics production. This urge to draw it again. Um, so so to answer your question, or to my response to that question, um, of the difference between this meme culture and what I think a comics culture should be, is somewhere there. Um, uh, that there is this space that is an individual relation between the artist and the reader, and that there is a relation between the artwork, the way the art is made, and so there is no. It's not a kind of a passive consumption, yeah, or it's not a. Uh, there's no distance between the artist, the comics artist, and the reader. The reader becomes more of a reader when uh, uh, when they start copying the work. I think that copying the artist's work, comics artist's work, is a very important distinguishing factor, uh, um, which I think I would like to claim for comics as something unique to comics. Um, as something that makes comics culture a sort of it creates a possibility of another kind of community, that a visual community uh, that is partaking in this. So in comics culture, you always have this all over the world. You have this thing of fan comics or fan fiction, which is an important, very important aspect of the way comics are consumed. So there is the work made by the creator, the artist, and then there are all these other works which are like based based on the characters, but you tell new stories. And there is simply copies or just fan art um, of you know of all the of comics. So I think that if you want to create a popular sense or popular dimension, I think the popular dimension consists of these kind of activities, and I think that is important to to make to sustain a popular culture. So though memes and related social media imagery does some of the has taken up some of the functions of political cartooning, I still don't think that it is it constitutes an expansion of comics culture. Uh, uh, yeah, so this distinction I think I would make, and I think this is an important distinction.
Okay. Uh, Thank you, Bharat, for giving us this time. Um, so,
I yeah yeah. So my thing is that I'm not very fluent in speaking, so I meander all over the place and new ideas
no,
just
no,
pop up. So it's I just hope it is
no,
intelligible to the viewer. Yeah.
no, I enjoyed listening to you.
Okay.
Um, so, one second, I just stopped the recording.
Oh yes.
Um,
Shoot. I'll stop the recording here.
yeah.